cousin.
Hey, I don't care. I do not care what you do up in Napa with your fucking tweezers and your foie gras. You got no fucking idea what you're doing here. None. Zero. So we are gonna stick with what works, and we are gonna fucking make sure we got enough food to feed these fucking dorks.
This is The Bear, the hit streaming series you've been avoiding watching because you're afraid it'll give you a panic attack. And you're right to be afraid.
Actually, agree.
Well, then I actually take it back. You.
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 Please. Okay.
No.
Let's.
Wait.
Hey.
No. Wait a second.
It's intense, fast-paced, and anxiety-inducing. And even as the characters on the show have climbed up a career ladder, honing their skills, becoming more competent chefs, and gaining recognition from both colleagues and the public, it never seems to actually get any easier for them. Let me back up. When The Bear burst onto the scene in 2022, it felt like a breath of fresh air. Most shows about cooking and food fall into one of two categories. You've got what I call the Gordon Ramsay genre of competition, from Hell's Kitchen to MasterChef to Eat or Be Eaten. A show I'm pitching where the losing chef gets baked into the next dish. I think TLC would run it after MILF Manor. The other category is the Anthony Bourdain genre of travel, using food as a way to experience new people and new cultures, although it's mostly evolved into an excuse for celebrities or celebrity chefs, or both, to eat their way across the globe and pretend to connect with the hoi polloi. But The Bear was different. We rarely had seen a scripted show that focused on kitchen workers and treated them with this amount of attention and respect. This was a show about an underrepresented and underappreciated group of people. The show's first season was a tight story about Carmy Berzatto, a Michelin star level chef who returns home to take over a failing neighborhood sandwich shop, The Beef, after the previous owner, his brother, Mikey, dies by suicide. That season thrived on the inherent conflict between Carmy's upscale kitchen training and the working class people who worked at The Beef.
You cut vegetables like a bitch.
Don't wipe your hands on your apron, chef.
Jeff.
Chef.
Carmy struggled to come to terms not just with his brother's death, but also with the seemingly huge step back his career had taken, being pulled back into a world and family he'd tried desperately to escape.
I know who you are.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, you're the most excellent CDC at the most excellent restaurant in the entire United States of America. So, what are you doing here, I guess?
Making sandwiches.
This was a decidedly working class story that I think resonated with a lot of people because it embodied the anxiety and burnout that hit a breaking point during the pandemic. But as the show has progressed into seasons 2 and 3, with the 4th and final season coming next year, its direction has changed in a way that I think a lot of people haven't necessarily liked. Carmy has successfully remodeled The Beef into The Bear, a fine dining restaurant intent on earning its own Michelin star.
Sid, we're gonna get a star.
That class conflict with his employees isn't nearly as central as it once was, with the show's attention having turned instead to the double-edged sword of passion and following your dreams.
Well, dreams are a son of a bitch, aren't they?
And as I watch that change, I can't help but think about how The Bear, both the story and the series as a thing itself, perfectly embodies a different kind of dream, the American dream, and how out of reach it feels to so many people. That's right, The Bear is chefaganda. Yeah, this is what I do when I'm taking a break from copaganda. I talk about the failed American dream, which is totally unrelated from the cop thing. Let me tell you, they're totally different things. Totally unrelated. Now, I understand this isn't necessarily the main focus of the show. It touches on a ton of topics, from the ways in which we show our love for one another to cycles of abuse and addiction. But that first season is clearly interested in class and the value of a local neighborhood restaurant.
Uncle Jimmy wants to buy this place.
It's not for sale.
I know, that's what I wanted to tell you.
That it's not for sale?
No, that I think we should sell it to him.
So we can flip it into an Applebee's?
And I think that the way the show has evolved shows us why the promise of social mobility rings increasingly more hollow with every passing year. Because for as much as the workers of The Beef have succeeded in their goals, bettering themselves and the restaurant, it hasn't brought them any kind of happiness. And it's come at the expense of where they came from. You see, Carmy hasn't saved The Beef, he just gentrified it.
How do you hear it?
I hear it like, yo, fuck this fancy fuck. I want my shit.
The people who ate at The Beef probably can't afford to eat at The Bear, nor would they even likely want to, given the insane difference between food style and price.
It's 9 courses, so $175 plus tip.
For a lot of us watching at home, watching Carmy plate food through a TV screen is probably the closest we're ever going to get to fine dining. Or, in the words of one Twitter user, if a cheap sandwich shop in the city where I could get a Big Pop, fries, and a hot dog shut down because a white man moved back home and wanted to turn it into a high-end restaurant, I would pray for that restaurant's downfall every day. So let's talk about the shifting ideas of the bear, how it portrays accomplishment, what that accomplishment does to us, and what the cost is. The show just finished its 3rd season, but this video isn't going to spoil too much, just gonna kind of provide a lens with which to watch the show. But, I'm also going to be talking about the show, so, there's some kind of level of spoilers you're just gonna have to be okay with. Or cry about it in the comments, I don't really care. All press is good press, baby!
You excited?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Try and contain yourself.
You're unlikely to find a universal definition of the American dream, but it generally boils down to an idea of upward social and economic mobility. In the words of the World Economic Forum, quote, "For decades, a majority of Americans have been able to climb the economic ladder by earning higher incomes than their parents. These improving conditions are known as upward mobility and form an important part of the American dream." It doesn't even have to be cross-generational. It's the idea that with hard work and a can-do attitude, you too can improve your status. Rags to riches and pull yourself up by your bootstraps and all that jazz. And this isn't just an American thing either. It's a feature of many Western nations. The UK just calls it social mobility, for example, because they're boring. But whether you call it the American dream or something else doesn't really matter. This is an idea you've heard echoed a ton in popular culture.
I had no choice. I literally had no choice. I had to make it out. Like I had no choice. I had to make it out for me, my mom, my family.
The problem is that this dream, this promise, it's not going so hot. I think most of us feel that the gap between the richest Americans and the rest of us is growing every year. And that's because the data backs it up.
Sounds about right.
According to the Federal Reserve, the top 1% holds 31% of household wealth, compared to 24% in 1989. A 2022 survey from the Brookings Institute found that if you are earning in the bottom third of income in your early 30s, you can expect to be in the bottom fifth of wealth by the time you reach your late 50s. Only 33% of people get out. From that report, quote, "This growing wealth gap might be less of a concern if there is significant opportunity to move up the wealth ladder, but there is not. Americans are quite unlikely to move far up or down the wealth ranks early in life, and their chances decrease with age. Wealth inequality is high, and wealth status is sticky. Yet, it's hard to miss the American dream mentality at work in the world of the bear."
It's inspiring, really, because it's kind of like, if you really nurture these dreams, these goals, no matter how batshit crazy they sound, and trust me, there are like 15 more of these breakthroughs, positively fucking idiotic, all right? But you can make an impact, right?
Carmy left Chicago and his family when he was just getting started in his chef career, before traveling the world on a culinary education tour and establishing himself as a great chef in his own right. When he returns to Chicago, his family friend Richie is the poster boy for the white working class origins of the beef.
That's why I keep telling you guys, stop fucking with this place. You let up a little bit, everything changes. You don't realize this is a delicate ecosystem. And it's held together by a shared history and love and respect.
He opts for the cheapest, shoddiest solutions. He's loud, rude, set in his ways, and is selling drugs in the back alley to keep the business from folding.
Look, I don't deal like that, like I distribute just little bits here and there when I'm holding,
Out of my restaurant.
out of the alley behind your brother's restaurant to help it.
Carmy's family is pretty stereotypically white working class as well, perhaps most highlighted in the season 2 episode Fishes, where we see the hard distinction between them and John Mulaney's city slicker character.
You got $500 on you?
Do you like baseball cards?
May I take those one at a time?
Go ahead.
I
Do I have access to $500?
Yeah.
I absolutely do.
Great. That's perfect.
I'm 43
That's
year old
great.
man.
That's great. Good.
I am
Yeah.
indifferent to baseball cards.
Listen,
That's
baseball
okay.
cards are back.
That's
They're
okay.
back.
The Bears autos are riddled with volatility, struggling with mental health and addiction issues, and an alcoholic father who puts up one of his kids for collateral in a bet. Wait, no, that last one is from Shameless, not The Bear. It's hard to keep Jeremy Allen White Chicago projects straight in my mind, I'm sorry. Hell, in that episode Fishes, we even get Better Call Saul giving Mikey crap for living with his mom.
That's good, Lee.
Yeah, tell a story about how you're living with your mom and you're borrowing money off of her and any other sucker who'll listen to your bullshit.
Carmy, on the other hand, has training. He knows what he's doing, and he sets about turning the beef into a respectable establishment. He hires Sydney as a sous chef, and once they get some money together from uncle and angel investor Cicero, they go about chasing their very own Michelin star.
This is going to be a destination spot. This is going to be an excellent restaurant. And I know that because we're going to get a star.
Carmy sends all of his workers out on residencies at other restaurants, giving them the same kind of training he got, and teaching them the skills necessary to take the restaurant to the next level, which is pretty explicitly how the project of turning the beef into the bear is framed.
Take us there, Bear.
Yes, chef.
One of the most celebrated episodes of the show, Forks, is basically a speedrun of this idea. Richie, who has been steadfastly resisting the changes Carmy brings, gets sent to the high-end restaurant ever, where he is given the tedious task of washing and polishing every fork by hand.
I've been doing this for 9 hours. I think I know what's clean.
I'm telling you that's not clean. That was not clean either. Please do them properly.
They're goddamn forks.
He hates it, as I'm sure any of us would. I don't even like doing my own dishes, and I bet I'd like doing it for rich pricks at $10 an hour, even less. It's not difficult to see why he's having a hard time buying in. Eventually, though, his attitude turns around when he learns that the restaurant isn't really about the food, that the impossible standards give them purpose, and that actually it's not about the money or business at all. Hell, they even decide to provide an entire night of service to their customers for free, as a little treat.
I want to go above and beyond tonight. Every supplement and caviar, please. A tour of the kitchen, a champagne tour in the gallery as well. And guys, we're not going to let these people spend $1. Do not drop a check. I want to blow their fucking minds.
They're not there for the money, it's not even really a job to them. This is about their love of food. Well, not even that, since most of the people Richie interacts with are servers, not cooks. So what it's actually about is their dedication to hospitality.
You know, I used to work for this guy who used to say that taking care of people at the highest level was like working at a hospital. You know, like it was like medical.
That's a little much.
I'm just saying, I think that's why restaurants and hospitals use the same word, hospitality.
When Richie emerges from his fellowship, he's almost unrecognizable. He likes going to work now. He feels a sense of purpose. He even likes his daughter's taste in Taylor Swift. And if Taylor Swift isn't a signifier of gentrification, I don't know what is. Perhaps most symbolically, though.
Sorry, you're wearing a suit?
Yeah, I wear suits now.
You see, Richie, who ran the beef following Mikey's death, represents the kind of past that Carmy has to update. Or as the show is so fond of saying,
Yeah, well, I subtracted.
he has to be streamlined and ironed out. And the show portrays this as pretty aspirational.
I think for a long time I didn't really know where I fit, you know, and I would shove myself into like places and things where I definitely did not fit, and I think that probably definitely made things worse.
Richie isn't the only aspect of the beef that needs to modernize in order to become the bear. The Fack family is everywhere in the third season, messing up the bear's lofty ambitions and annoying everyone, from coworkers to, as far as I can tell, most of the show's audience.
Hey, Niels, if you want to take a step back, you're in the light. Back. A little bit more. More. Again. More. More. Keep going. Keep going. One more step. Okay, great.
Ibrahim, who doesn't really want to get trained up to work in a fancy restaurant, is more or less completely sidelined when the bear opens, leaving him by himself as an afterthought to work the takeout window in the back of the restaurant, where the beef regulars, or beefies as I like to call them, can still get their sandwich fix. And even his unwillingness to grow with the restaurant is painted as a choice made out of fear of change.
This used to be a good restaurant here. What happened to it?
They had to close. I heard there were too many old bitches working here. Couldn't hack it.
Maybe some Old bitches like us their bitch ways. Maybe they get scared.
But it's not like the Bear is raking in new money for its workers. The restaurant is actually bleeding money as Carmy chases fancier and fancier ingredients in order to impress the delicate palates of potential reviewers and anonymous Michelin inspectors.
I have a bill in my hands for $11,268 for butter. Buddy, what is it? The fucking rare Transylvanian five-titted goat? We cannot fucking keep this up.
It's Orwellian.
It's dystopian butter?
The starkest evidence for just how much the restaurant has changed is in a flashback episode in season 3, where we see Tina first get hired. She found the beef while desperate for a job, bonding with Mikey over the working class experience.
I definitely do not like never not being fucked. You know, I don't like that you gotta make enough money every single day just to pay for yesterday.
I don't need to be impassioned. I don't need to make magic. I don't need to save the world, you know? I just want to feed my kid, you know?
Amen.
The beef was a sandwich shop by regular people for regular people. Now it's the Bear, which serves a different clientele. These customers are wealthier, seeking the upscale artisanal experience of a restaurant you read about in some magazine rather than hear about from your buddy at work.
I got better stuff at home. That's a Cru Beaujolais.
In short, the Bear doesn't serve the same local neighborhood that the beef did. This dynamic is called gentrification. Maybe you've heard of it, where investment in a poor urban neighborhood creates and attracts new businesses and improved housing, but stuff that the original population cannot afford, pushing them out. While the area does get richer, the people that live there are mostly excluded from that economic growth.
Some people think about gentrification as just investment. Like, well, gentrification is a good thing because we need investment. But the real factor of what makes it gentrification is the element of displacement that comes along with the investment. That's what gentrifies something.
Gentrification is the latest chapter of a decades-long process of redlining and urban renewal, where black neighborhoods are denied the same opportunities as white neighborhoods, and public works projects cut the hearts out of those communities. Gentrification isn't as overtly organized as redlining, but it preys on the inequalities those practices created and amplifies them.
Left behind in central city neighborhoods, low-income households and communities of color bore the brunt of highway system expansion and urban renewal programs, which resulted in the mass clearance of homes, businesses, and neighborhood institutions, and set the stage for widespread public and private disinvestment in the decades that followed.
For almost 30 years, 98% of FHA loans were handed out to white borrowers. Not only were black neighborhoods redlined, and not only was the Fair Housing Act selectively enforced, if at all, but it is still today much harder for a black person to get a mortgage or home loan than it is for a white person.
And The Bear is kind of the perfect show to talk about this dynamic. Upscale restaurants are often seen as markers of gentrification, attracting outside money into a neighborhood and raising the value of real estate in the area, which in turn pushes out the restaurants that were already there serving that poorer community. As one Seattle Times writer succinctly summed it up, it's a tale as old as restaurants. When the rent goes up, the business often shuts down.
You ever think about like how all the good shit is gone?
And gentrification becomes even more clear when you look at the location of Mr. Beef, the sandwich shop the Bear is based on. Mr. Beef is just a few blocks away from the ruins of the historic Cabrini Green public housing projects.
My playground, because I play in it, I stay in it, and I live in it, and it's home to me. And it's precious from right here. I love Cabrini.
In 1962, construction on Cabrini Green finished, with 15 high-rise buildings, nearly 2,000 units of subsidized housing. And from the very start, the projects were incredibly mismanaged.
First Daley administration used federal funds to create what was supposed to be low-income housing, but then decided that it was too nice for low-income families, and instead sold those units off to more affluent whites.
In 1966, black tenants filed a class action lawsuit against the Chicago Housing Authority, alleging that they had, quote, intentionally limited the number of black families living in white housing projects and deliberately targeted only predominantly black neighborhoods in which to build public housing, while HUD knowingly assisted CHA in carrying out this discrimination. They won that case in 1969. Hooray! Unfortunately, absolutely nothing changed. By 1981, the problem was still prevalent enough that HUD was put under a consent decree by the federal government. It's basically when the feds come in and take over in order to ensure that changes are made. If you want to learn more about consent decrees, check out my video on We Own This City. That consent decree remained in place until 1997, a year after Mayor Richard Daley had already announced that they would be tearing down the Cabrini Green homes. That's right, things had gotten so bad under this universally recognized racism that the homes had fallen into disrepair, and the city just decided to tear them down and start over from scratch. The development was billed as a $2 billion investment in the community. At his press conference, Mayor Daley claimed, quote, "This near north development plan seeks to build a community where children have safe spaces to play and learn, and where working families at every income level can pursue the American dream of owning a home." He went on to say, quote, "Let me be perfectly clear about this. Every family that wants to stay in this community will stay in this community, regardless of their income." But that was a lie.
Our Weekend Watch shines a spotlight on government activity, and this morning the Better Government Association is taking a closer look at rebuilding Cabrini Green. Mayor Richard M. Daley's administration made big promises to Cabrini Green residents, like thousands of construction jobs and a revitalized neighborhood. But a BGA investigation found that long delays have forced many Black residents out of the neighborhood.
26,000 families have been affected. The agency has relocated more than 12,000. 13,000 families are no longer in the system, and CHA admits it cannot find 2,100 families who are displaced.
According to Block Club Chicago, of the 2,500 construction jobs Daley promised to Cabrini Green residents, the BGA found only 40 who actually got one. Of the nearly 4,000 homes already built or underway, only 48 are being built by a construction company owned by a former Cabrini Green resident, the only Black-owned builder on the project, the BGA found. And of the thousands of families who were promised they could return, more than 80% never did. Some were disqualified, relocated, or simply overwhelmed with bureaucracy. Many died waiting. Even today, 85 families who used to live in Cabrini Green are still on decades-old waiting lists to move back. This is what usually happens during urban renewal projects. The money doesn't go into that community, it goes into replacing that community.
This downtown right here. See, imagine we got high rise, low income. What the fuck? These motherfuckers ain't doing shit. Get them from right there. Build $1 million homes and $150,000 homes and put these white people there who gonna pay that money.
This is just one prominent example of a much larger nationwide trend where chronic disinvestment into neighborhoods of color collide with skyrocketing housing costs, attracting wealthier, whiter populations that price out the communities living there, taking their homes and leaving them with nowhere to go.
Today, both people and capital are flooding back into these historically disinvested neighborhoods. One reason new people are moving into these neighborhoods is because of their relative affordability. In many U.S. cities, the rental market has gotten increasingly expensive, and even moderate-income earners are on the hunt for lower housing costs. This means that in some places, they are looking in historically disinvested communities, often the same neighborhoods previous generations left behind during the days of white flight.
While the show has put a lot of emphasis on the white working class nature of the Bearzados and facts, the Bear employs a lot of workers of color, from Marcus to Sydney to Ibrahim to Gary to Tina. And these are exactly the kinds of people who get pushed out of their neighborhoods when fancy restaurants come to town, something that the show hasn't really grappled with all that much.
I just think I spun a little bit when I heard about the rent increase.
Baby, it's going to be okay.
I don't want to lose this place.
We won't.
And we can't.
Now, I don't mean to imply that people born in poverty have to stay there, or that you should never seek to get educated, or make money, or better yourself, or whatever. But I think this is a dynamic at the heart of the failing American dream. That the way to accomplish amorphous ideas like success and prestige, or real things like money, is to divest from the community you came from and focus on serving those with more money. You don't get a Michelin star for serving Italian beef sandwiches to construction workers. You get one by serving elites.
So that's how you get one of them stupid fucking stars with a motherfucking squirt gun?
This isn't to say that people shouldn't have dreams. There's nothing wrong with Marcus wanting to make some awesome, fancy, artistic pastries.
If you fuck with Marcus, I will murder you.
But he was doing it even before the beef became the Bear. So why do Carmy and Sydney have to turn a neighborhood sandwich shop into a minimalist, fine dining restaurant to make their artistic dreams come true? And why does it have to be in place of the beef?
That bad?
No, just restaurants.
Yeah, right? Why do we do this to ourselves?
So why do you do this?
Why are you doing this?
Carm,
Yes.
why are you doing this?
This is a mantra the bear likes to repeat. Why do this to yourself? Why work so hard? Often it's framed as a product of passion or obsession.
Right? What the fuck was I thinking? Like I was gonna be in a relationship? I'm a fucking psycho.
But there's another, more obvious reason.
I know you can put a lot of pressure on yourself.
Yeah, well, I live in a 2-bedroom apartment with you, don't own a car, and for dinner the other night I had a left Twix, so I think pressure's our friend here.
Anxiety is one of the defining characteristics of the bear. It portrays its kitchen as constantly bordering on the brink of a panic attack. And it strikes me that this anxiety isn't just the theme of the kitchen, but also that of social mobility.
I suffer from anxiety and dread.
Who doesn't?
We all have?
And I think the bear demonstrates this kind of anxiety really, really palpably. Mikey himself seems to envy Carmy's ability to get out, to make beautiful food you can post on Instagram.
Check that out.
What the hell is that?
I have no idea. No, my baby brother, he's a chef.
Fancy.
Yeah, he's a shit.
Yeah?
Yeah.
But it's never brought Carmy any peace. His quest to get a Michelin star for the bear has turned him into the very kind of person he despises, a bully who stomps on his employees rather than lifting them up.
You gave me ulcers.
Dude, you need to unclutch your pearls. It worked. You're here. Look at all this.
And the sick, twisted thing is that that very natural stress also makes social mobility way more difficult.
It's just difficult to think how people could become socially mobile when all of their energy is spent just staying in one spot, trying to keep their head above water.
Darren has addressed a key issue here. I can't talk about social mobility without mentioning stress. Stress is toxic. It impairs everything from our decision-making ability to our cognitive function. Poverty obviously causes stress. If you're worrying about whether your food bank package is going to be enough to feed the kids, you're not really going to be giving that Open University degree your full attention, are you?
That's a clip from a 2019 BBC radio documentary. I guess that's what they call podcasts over there, by Byron Vincent, called The Trouble with Social Mobility. In it, he examines this phenomenon from all angles, and how the emphasis on social mobility tends to obscure more fundamental problems. How the idea of social mobility implicitly blames those in poverty for not pulling themselves out.
And I think the social mobility narrative risks kind of establishing this idea that their status is lesser because they did not pursue that pathway. It's almost like this Victorian paternalism that we'll rescue these working class but bright children, out of this, chaos from which they would otherwise live.
It's a narrative that relies on a hierarchy. You can only climb a ladder if there is a ladder. In other words,
the broad point I wanted to address in this documentary is the idea that social mobility can only be sold in an unequal society.
I think a lot of the restaurant dynamics portrayed by the bear are really toxic and problematic, even when they seem inspirational.
47 seconds now. If you cost us that kind of time, you sure shit better own up to it. Because we sure shit are gonna pay for it. And get back to work. Fuck you, Garrett.
Yes, chef, fuck me.
Which might be the point, because restaurants are a perfect setting to display this kind of cynical aspiration.
Yeah, why'd they quit?
Because they didn't want to work in a, quote, dysfunctional kitchen.
Show me a functional one.
Take, for example, the Copenhagen restaurant Noma, a 3 Michelin star restaurant that has been named the best restaurant in the world 5 times. It was even featured on The Bear. It is insanely expensive, with Eater reporting that a dinner with wine costs approximately $800. Yet, as the Financial Times reported in 2022, the restaurant relies heavily on unpaid interns, who made up nearly half of the kitchen's 64-person staff in 2019, despite the massive amounts of money pouring in. That year, the Danish restaurant industry was worth over $6 billion US.
And guys, we're not gonna let these people spend $1.
As that article describes, these internships didn't really provide opportunity, only exploitation. As one Polish chef told the Times, quote, "We found out that we have actually been victims of kidnapping from life, because the life we had been offered is not a life."
That's a dark fucking hole right there.
Yet, when we do get a peek into a Michelin star restaurant on The Bear, the show insists that these workers aren't overworked, because if you love what you do, it's not work.
You really drink this Kool-Aid, huh?
Yeah, I do.
Why?
Because I love this, Richie. I love this so much, dude.
And Noma is far from the only case of a toxic fine dining restaurant, with traumatic stories of kitchen violence from Michelin star restaurants littering the internet, with those same head chefs then turning around and fighting to keep worker wages down. And even when you're feeding the rich, you don't actually get to move up. You just lose your neighborhood as that money pools to the top. We got to see this dynamic on full display during something that lingers over the restaurant industry as a whole and the world of the bear: COVID. During the pandemic, thousands of workers were laid off, since most food service workers lacked sick leave or other benefits. As the New York Times wrote, quote, all strata of the industry, from the owners and their celebrity chefs to the waiters and waitresses, barbacks and busboys, who effectively are facing layoffs and may be unable to pay their rent. Except that's not really true. It wasn't all strata. In the US, relief money during the pandemic pooled to franchises and chain restaurants, while leaving independent restaurants to fend for themselves, expanding the wealth gap between restaurant owners and the workers the industry relies on for their value. While it's being widely reported that the restaurant industry has bounced back, articles like this one from Forbes admit that part of that bounce back includes reduced hours, which, as anyone who has worked in food service could tell you, means less money for workers. I think you could make the argument that the bear itself has become gentrified. One of the staff writers for the first season, Alex O'Keefe, told The New Yorker that he'd been dirt broke when working on that first season, with no heat in his apartment and forced to write episodes from the public library. When the show won a WGA award for Best Comedy Series, he had a negative balance in his bank account. He told The New Yorker that, quote, the only future I'm seeking financially is to enter that middle class, which has always been rarefied for someone who comes from poverty.
Especially if you're young, if you're like me, if you're a black writer, if you're indigenous, a writer from the working class or from poverty, these writers who are coming into Hollywood, a new wave, and bringing a new wave of creativity, making shows like The Bear or Abbott Elementary, Severance, shows that you just haven't seen something quite like that before, really innovative stuff, we're not being invested in whatsoever, because they know that, hey, they can make us feel lucky to have the gig, right?
But despite winning the show awards, he wasn't brought back for subsequent seasons. And now at this point, the show is mostly being told from the perspective of an owner, not the workers at a restaurant. Maddie Matheson, who plays the main fac on the show, is also an executive producer, celebrity chef, and restaurant owner himself. Will Guidara has writing credits for the third season, a multi-millionaire restaurateur who has owned and operated multiple Michelin star restaurants. He even wrote that book that Richie reads to become a good employee.
Unreasonable hospitality, really, it just means making the choice to be as unreasonable in pursuit of how you make people feel as you are the product you're selling those people.
Wow, what a revolutionary idea, Will. People like it when you let them exploit you? No way! Fun fact, that book was published by Simon Sinek, who's one of those, motivational speakers, but he got like $100,000 for doing motivational leadership speaking to ICE. Cool guy. It always comes back to propaganda. My point is, what started out as a sleeper hit with relatively under-the-radar actors and a first-time showrunner has quickly ballooned as big-name guest stars fall over themselves to join the cast for a scene or two. The show itself has become more prestige-focused, with the entire first episode of the third season bordering on art house, a 35-minute montage light on dialogue and heavy on metaphor. Now, I'm not trying to romanticize poverty.
I think it's probably better for you to experience what it's like to be poor. They say that leads to empathy.
But the show achieved its initial success, in part because it gave a group of underappreciated working class people some shine. I mean, a lot more people have worked in food service at some point in their lives than there are doctors. And look at how many doctor shows there are. The show has turned Mr. Beef into a tourist destination, more than doubling their daily sales. This is by no means a bad thing, and Mr. Beef has maintained its roots, but tourism is also a double-edged sword when it comes to gentrification, especially when it comes to prestigious restaurants, or fans of prestigious TV shows. An influx of tourism to inner-city neighborhoods has been shown to drive up the number of short-term rentals like Airbnbs, making it harder for people in those neighborhoods to afford to live there. At the same time, the show could easily go the other way. Ibrahim's beef window, while not receiving much airtime, is the only part of the business that makes money.
Ibrahim needs help.
I know. What do we do?
Bring in Chris, Chucky, pay him from the beef.
Deal. It's the only thing that makes money around here.
And when they do invest in the window, it's hiring those working class folk from back in the day, the ones who know and understand the beefies.
Hey, Carotes, what's up, my guy? What's going on, buddy? Thank you very much.
Order up for Marty, order up for Nike Air.
The only peace Carmy has ever found has been with Claire, who, after getting her own education at medical school, is still a fixture of the community. She's close with the Fack family and works as an emergency room doctor, serving the people in the neighborhood she grew up with. The bear is not over yet, and I think it's certainly still up for interpretation. I think you could look at it and see it as glorifying a kind of rise and grind mindset, where elitist chefs earn Michelin stars on the backs of overworked and sometimes not even paid workers, and then tell us about how special and important they are.
Like, we can make the world a nicer place. All of us in this room, we have this opportunity, perhaps even a responsibility, to create our own little magical worlds in a world that is increasingly in need of a little more magic. And every time I find myself like about ready to burn out, I reconnect with the fact that that is the business we're in.
Buying and selling multi-million-dollar real estate also can help with that burnout. Or you might think that it's pointing out the flaws and toxic elements of this kind of thinking. The show has repeatedly brought its focus back to the people, emphasizing that a restaurant isn't about the food, but the company.
And I think what I've learnt over the years, in all the places I've worked, is people don't remember the food. Sorry. It's the people that they remember.
I like the people, you know?
And I guess that's why people do it.
Do what?
Open restaurants.
But I do think that the more we imbue the narrative of social mobility with grandeur and virtue, the easier it becomes to blame those in poor communities for not being dedicated or virtuous enough. You don't improve the living standards of a neighborhood by upscaling it in a way that displaces an existing community. You do it by creating tenant unions, fighting for rent control provisions, and getting involved in the local politics that make the decisions around housing and zoning. You do it by recycling and redistributing wealth to create a more equitable and just society. Our entire vision of bettering yourself can't be at the expense of poor communities. We can't blame people in poverty for not pulling themselves out. Our only vision of progress can't be to displace and replace poor communities with no thought as to the people who already live there.
It used to be that poor people were maligned for being unemployed. These days, it's for doing jobs that are deemed unworthy. That is nonsense, and we need to push back against it from left or right. We need to stop denigrating our carers and our shelf stackers and our couriers, because once denigrated, low pay swiftly follows.
Gentrification is one of those issues that's really hard to find good, unbiased information on. Some news organizations are owned by corporations with real estate interests of their own. Looking at you, Washington Post, owned by Jeff Bezos, who's backing a real estate company that's snatching up single-family homes across the country like they're M&Ms or some other kind of candy you snatch up. That's why I'm excited to introduce this video's sponsor, Ground News, a website and app designed to help you pull back the curtain on media bias. On Ground News, every story comes with a quick visual breakdown of the political bias, factuality, and ownership of the source's reporting. Okay, alright, settle down, Ground News. For example, here's Ground News' coverage on Kamala Harris inheriting Biden's campaign funds. Right away, you can see over 100 news outlets have reported on this story. Below that, you can see that coverage was relatively evenly split between the left and the right. Best of all, Ground News makes it easy to compare headlines so you can see how this bias might affect framing. For example, on the right, Breitbart frames the transfer of funds as a shadow campaign and that Biden was ousted. Meanwhile, on the left, a few of the headlines framed the campaign funds as a war chest, and the Washington Post even starts their headline by saying that the GOP is eyeing legal challenges. As we inch closer and closer to annihilation, I mean the election, I'm going to be turning to Ground News more and more to sift through what's fact and what's a slogan. I also really like the blind spot feed, which highlights stories that are disproportionately covered by one side of the political spectrum or the other. In my research on police reform, it's been a really valuable resource to understand how messages about the police are being received by people in different media bubbles. Ground News is a fantastic tool for sifting through daily misinformation and bias. They provide all the tools you need to be a critical thinker, and I cannot recommend it enough. In fact, I believe Ground News is so useful that I'm offering 40% off their Vantage subscription. You can only access this discount through my link, so go to ground.news/skipintro or click the link in the video description and support an independent news platform working to make the media landscape more transparent. And if you're still watching, thank you so much. Please share, like, subscribe, the YouTube things. You can also support me on Patreon. Patreon's really great for helping me work on longer term videos, research projects. I'm working on a video about To Catch a Predator right now. That's the next propaganda. Takes a long time to get through all those. So it really helps. On Patreon, you can get mailbags, you can get early access to videos, you can get bonus content, you can get little skippies, you can get live watch-alongs, you get monthly roundups of all the TV I watch. There's lots of good stuff. And I'll read your comments. I won't read them on YouTube. You can do whatever you want in the comments here on YouTube. Not going to read them. I'm going to be honest to you. I have an ad blocker set up for it and everything. I cannot read the comments. It's very good for my mental health. But if you actually want to get in contact with me, you should join me on Patreon and message me there. And then I will get back to you in 5 to 7 business days. Patreon.com/skipintro.